Dear friends, welcome to the first session of 2026 of She and Rights. This is its 17th session since its inception, and today we will focus on the theme 2026 begins with growing anti-rights pushback against gender equality. It is time for accountability. This She and Rights session is together hosted by Global Center for Health, Diplomacy and Inclusion, CeHDI, Women Deliver Conference 2026, International Planned Parenthood Federation, IPPF, Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women, ARROW, Women's Global Network for Reproductive Rights, WGNRR, Asia Pacific Media Alliance for Health, Gender and Development Justice, APCAT Media, and CNS. And thanks to Dr. Tangelia Reddy for live streaming this session on his media channels. This session marks the 20th anniversary of Universal Periodic Review. So the session will also explore if UPR, a UN Human Rights Council mechanism for reviewing the human rights records of all 193 countries every 4.5 years, can be a critical accountability tool by integrating universal health coverage and fundamental human right to health into UPR recommendations. The month of January is also Cervical Cancer Awareness Month. Thanks to CeHDI for helping raise awareness and mobilize partners to do the same. As we know, cervical cancer is a largely vaccine-preventable cancer and for which highly sensitive screening and molecular diagnostic tools are available at the point of need in most low-resource settings. Yet, it remains a major cancer among women. But governments are saying that they would prepare by 2030 so that they can eliminate cervical cancer by the end of 2100. Such targets which lack ambition are not acceptable. We can end cervical cancer now because we have the tools to do so, provided we use them properly. A gentle reminder to our listeners of the third edition of She and Rights Media Awards 2026 that were announced in the She and Rights session of last month. Journalists reporting on issues raised by She and Rights are welcome to apply. The award ceremony would be held around Women Deliver Conference 2026. The link to apply is given in the chat box. A few quick housekeeping announcements before we begin. Participants can please type in their questions and comments in the chat box, even as the speakers present. We will take up as many relevant questions as time permits after all the speakers have presented. Friends, even before 2026 began, we have never been on track to deliver on gender equality and human right to health and broader development justice. For example, there has been hardly any decline in gender-based violence perpetrated by intimate partners and others since 2000. For example, again, despite promises to end female genital mutilation cutting by 2030, rates have instead increased by 15% over the last 8 years. And to make matters worse, the year 2026 has opened with growing backlash against gender equality, like the US withdrawal from 66 international organizations, such as those working to advance gender equality, including 31 UN entities. Few other countries are also toeing the US line. We need to understand and acknowledge the sinister link between gender injustice and patriarchy, capitalism, militarization, and religious fundamentalism. But at the same time, we all owe a lot to countless feminist leaders who championed the cause of gender justice since decades. We were able to make some progress despite the pushbacks historically, and we will continue to do so because of them and you all. Frontline defenders of health, safety, and rights of girls, women, and gender diverse peoples continue to protect the gains made and resist such pushbacks. I now invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Mabel Bianco, to set the stage with her opening address. Mabel, as we all know, is a noted feminist leader, physician activist, and founding president of FEIM, Foundation for Studies and Research on Women in Argentina. Welcome, Mabel.
Thank you, Shubha. Good morning, everybody. Can you listen to me well?
Yes, very well, very well. Despite your very early morning hours, Mabel. Thank you for being there.
Yes, for me it's a bit earlier. I didn't realize when I said yes when you invited me, but very well. It's a great pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to speak about the problem that we are having now, that this doesn't start this year. As you know, since in the first government of Trump in the US, he started to mention a lot of problems and making some problems against the UN activities and so on. But now, since the last year, because we are only in the first year of his government, and since the beginning appeared the criticized to the UN, and especially related to we were talking today, they are the women's rights, the girl rights, and in all their diversity, and also of many other human rights related to women more or not, because they are in general all human rights that the Trump is not interested and is denying. So the first symbol was the return from the World Health Organization. This is some of the entities that we need to take care, because it's so important, as was demonstrated during the pandemic, the COVID-19. Meanwhile, at the beginning, nobody knows all the studies and all the activities that the the World Health Organization organized and done. We advance also in prevention of the COVID-19. But as you know, Trump says that it's not a good work they are doing, so he left. But the problem is that when he left, he returned all the support, economical funding support to the entity. Now is a crisis in the World Health Organization, but of course there are other countries that are supporting. But these also create a disbalance that still have a great impact on the work they are doing. But now, later on, the things that it was announced, it was only oral announced, so nobody were so much preoccupied, but knowing that what he's saying is going to be done is the announcement he did about to be against and not supporting anymore the work of UN Women, because UN Women is working for things that his government is not supporting and is against, because of course equality, gender equality, is not a priority in Trump government. And we noticed due to all the activities that were interrupted in the US. But before that, he did a more terrible issue that still is making many travels in many countries, developing countries, of course, is they used to close USAID. USAID was an organization that helped to develop many programs that are supporting developing countries to do for their communities. And in Africa, for example, the issue to close USAID, it was terrible because it was a crisis in all the activities, or in most of the activities that the African countries are doing to work and care and prevent HIV/AIDS, malaria, and these issues that still are not well and not solved, because still HIV/AIDS is a very important infection affecting all countries, but the Africans are the most, or the world may say that they need more because they have great or high incidence rates. So with this, he did another issue that it was really very, very conflict for many countries, and of course dismantle in our region, in Latin America and the Caribbean. Most of the Central American countries, they have many of their activities related to women and children health, not only sexual and reproductive, but in general, health, access to health, they were stopped. And also many professionals lost their jobs due to that. So this is something that the last 2025 was a terrible year in which there were many decisions adopted by Trump that were making a crisis in the work that was done through the UN. And I think the last one that we couldn't avoid to speak is the invasion, the military invasion to Venezuela. We can say everything against the government of Venezuela. It doesn't need to be supported. But what we can accept is that through the military force, a government, another government as the US, entered the country, invade and rape the president. And this is something that broke all the international rights, done by a government that is one of the privileged 5 governments in the Security Council, that they have the right to veto. This is why the Security Council is now so less, or having not possibility to react, because due to these 5 countries, the most rich and powerful countries that have the right to veto, it couldn't say anything from all the last conflicts. And one of them, the most important, is the Ukrainian and Russia, because Russia is one of the 5 that have the veto right. So it's impossible to have the activity or the possibility that the Security Council works if this happens, because one of each of these 5 are doing the things that are against what the Security Council proposed. So this is some of the key issues why we are, many of us, and I think all of us, we are supporting the idea to reform the UN. But this is not in the light of the activity that the UN reform is doing. This is another issue that we need to consider. So when he announced at the beginning of the year that he's going to be out from these 66 entities, the most important is that 31 of them are UN dependent organizations. And there are a variety of organizations or agencies in which it's so important the participation, not only giving ideas and proposals, but also the funding. And I want to say also here something that happened last year, 2025, because USA is not participating anymore in the Agenda 2030 program, but also in the CSW. But they are remaining participating in the previous meetings, negotiations, in which they are bringing back the possibility to have a good and a strong statement or proposal. So they participate in the moments when we are not knowing, because they are the close negotiation before or previous the meetings, and then they disappear. The first time they did so very clearly was in Sevilla in the FFD4, that they make all the closing and reducing and giving a low statement, and then they didn't attend the Sevilla meeting. They didn't give the discussion openly. They were behind and they were making all the travels. So this is something to consider, how they are not really believe and act in relation to multilateralism. And of course, they don't believe in multilateralism. They believe only in bilateral, in which through the force, this force could be the military force, as this was in Venezuela, or could be a fund and retiring the funding. So it's another way to impose their decision or limiting the decisions and the activities. And of course, the other is to retire the important voice that many developing countries needs to be in those agencies to be strong. And I want to let you know that one of the great consequences for all of us in all the world are that the first seven, I think they are the seven, no, the first five united organization or agencies that they retired, they announced that they are not going to be anymore, they abandoned, are the economic commissions. So is the economic commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, for the Asia and the Pacific, for the Western Africa, and also for Western Asia, and also for Africa. And they are not anymore in the Department of Economical and Social Affairs, the COSOC. So this is a great problem, because these economic commissions, they are supporting regionally most of the previous and the preparation activities for the global. And this is an important places in which we can discuss more close and more how we say, in a better way, because we share regionally more ideology, but also practices. So this is so important that we have these economical commissions in which we can work and we can prepare for the global activities. Well, now they are not going to be anymore the participation of the USA and the funding. For us in Latin America, we are very preoccupied about that because we know ECLAC, that is the Economical Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, is depending on the money of United States of America. And as you know, our governments in general are not so important in financing the UN and also those agencies. So now they are going to have a crisis that we are going to discover the magnitude of the problem now when we start preparing for the CSW and also for the Economic Forum and so on. So these are the critical points. And the critical other point is that they selected as a country in which agencies, organizations, or areas in the UN, they are active or not. They didn't say nothing about to be out of the Security Council. Of course, because they are there having the possibility to veto and stop the activities. And now the last news we have is this, that due to the problem with the Gaza and the needs that USA want to recover Gaza, and of course the recovery is to have possibility to do some business, because it's not only to help Gaza and the Palestinians. They want to do business. They are governed by the business. This is why First America is what are the business we can do and how we can obtain money. And this money is supposed to be for the government, but we don't know how many of them are going to be for their personal business. But well, let's suppose they are all legal there. So what we know is now is creating this peace area or a new agency that is being governed by him, is the president, and the decision making will be Trump, and in which is inviting the countries or the governments in order to be there and also to be permanent members, not only the first 3 years as they did for everybody, is if they pay $1 billion. So this is similar to the UN, and this is something in which he wants to make problems in order to make the UN more weak, more not necessary at all. And this is something that he's doing. He's not stopping. He's having, and of course, now he's saying he's not going to be using the military force to have Groenlandia, but he's doing, but because the arrangement with the agreement with the OTAN is really something in which the USA is going to grow all the military missions in Groenlandia. They have the possibility to have 13, according to an old agreement they signed, and they are going to apply now. So it's going to be a complete possession of Greenlandia through the military presence. So he's saying this is to benefit and all of us in the Occidental world, but this is not true. It's only the interest of the United States of America and Trump position. So what is the panorama now? The panorama for us now is that, first of all, we need to be more close and trying to work in more relation to those countries in our regions that they are still supporting or being active in the defense of the women and girls in all their diversity rights. Because now we need to work together in order to make them more helpful to this to our activities, and to be together to have joint statements in which we could be more vocal in the global arena. And as I hope you have, you know, or you knew what the, not yesterday, I think was the day before, the president of Canada in Davos make a statement calling the medium or the middle and low developing countries to be together. It doesn't matter the region, worldwide, because the enemy are these big, important, economically, politically, and military countries. He's not saying anything about United States of America, but also he's including on this Russia, China. So we need to be together to be able to resist and also combat those countries. This is what we need to do as civil society, as women's rights defenders, and as to be working together with our government and those governments that are supporting in order to have a joint. And I hope for the CSW this year, we are going to have the voices, the regional voices, unified from developing regions, let's say, in a way that we are going to be possible to have a good statement and a good agreed conclusion. And why? Because we have still the vote capacity, and each of us is important and we need to strengthen the multilateralism. So I think we need to be out of our regions, working together among us, the civil society, but also with the government, with the agencies, local, nationally, regionally, in order to be able to resist and have a voice and impose our voice. That is most important, to have a voice. Impose, and they are not going to decrease and do the backlash they want. This is what I can say to you, and I hope you are fighting at the UN80, because now we need to understand that the reform of the UN, it needs to be ensuring multilateralism, and that the mandates of some of the important agencies as UN Women and UNFPA are not finished. They need to be strengthened. So maybe they merge, okay, but how about the mandates? we need to be closely looking at that and fighting on that. Thank you very much, and hope I make you to start thinking or to discuss more about this. Thank you, Shubha.
Thank you, Mabel. Thank you very much for opening our eyes once again to the horrific realities we are living into these days, and to unite, irrespective of status or South and North. All of us need to unite and work together. And with you people at the helm of it, I'm sure we will be able to achieve what we aspire for. Thank you very much, Mabel. Our next speaker is Paola Salwan, Senior Director for Collective Action, Women Deliver. Welcome, Paola.
Thank you so much, Shobha, and thank you for everyone. Thank you, Mabel, for the keynote introduction. It is my pleasure to be here today, and I think you provided me with the best segue to talk about why do feminist movements are organizing at this particular moment. And I think I would like to take us on a bit of a historical journey, because they're not only just organizing in this particular moment. Feminist movements have historically organized, and unfortunately, patriarchy never takes a vacation, and therefore we have never stopped organizing. For Beijing, for Cairo, in the context of the Maria Verde, in the context of amplifying each other's agenda, feminist movements have always organized. And I think that it is true to say that we are in the heirs, and we inherit this organization and this mobilization. But this particular political moment, it's true, is a bit different from what we have been facing in the past. It is true that we are seeing a rise in kind of unapologetic, unabashed, hegemonic masculinity, and really harmful gender stereotypes that are being spread online and in person, and that are embodied by several governments. And so with that, we are also seeing a rise in the far-right agenda and fascism or fascistic governments that are bringing this message of women should not have the same rights as men, because we are somehow less than. And it's not just women, it's all marginalized communities. And so I think there is also, coupled to that, a new element in terms of this particular political moment, which is how many billionaires are actually ready to take this agenda and put the weight, the sheer weight of their incommensurable wealth behind it. And so this is why we are seeing deeply biased algorithm. We are seeing deeply biased misinformation around women's bodies, around women's health, and a really undermining of women's agencies, of women and girls' agency. So why are we continuing to mobilize, and why it's important that we continue to do so? And as Women Deliver, as a convener of a big gender equality conference, for us, it's really important that we continue to meet each other, to strategize together. This is what we did in Beijing. This is what we did in Cairo. This is what we did during the International Conferences of Women at CSW and in other global spaces. Women and girls and feminists have really historically leveraged these spaces to be able to push forward our agenda. And so why we are organizing it really is to counter this kind of conservative international that we are faced with, and we are organizing to push forward a more progressive agenda that really centers the autonomy, the rights, the dignity of women and girls. I keep saying that, faced with this conservative international, we should build our own movement, transnational solidarity movement, that centers feminist principles. And this is what we will try to emulate and center during the conference that Women Deliver is convening in Melbourne at the end of April. In that, when we were talking about, mobilizing, I think we would be remiss not to mention the particularly strong leadership of adolescent girls in particular, and of girls and young people in general. There is this narrative around girls being the leaders of tomorrow. And I think it needs to be shifted a little. And really, we need to center girls are the leaders of today. And they are mobilizing themselves, and they have a very strong agenda themselves. And why? It's because among this kind of backlash, I really do not like that term, but within this really strong attacks on women and girls, and this really strong conservative fascist attacks, girls are particularly targeted. We have been, in global spaces for a long time. I was doing advocacy at the Human Rights Council in other spaces for a long time, and you could see that the tensions during negotiations when it pertained to the right to bodily autonomy of girls or to the agency of girls was particularly increased. So there is a specific crystallization, a resistance to recognize girls as rights holders or as human beings that have their own agency and that can, make their own decisions. And there should be standards that justify standards that allow them to make their own decisions. And so we are seeing, for instance, Women Deliver is part of a broader community called the Girls Deliver community, and within this community, girls have been have written a girls' manifesto where they articulate their demands and they articulate the principles around which they want to organize their activism. And I think that these initiatives really need to be amplified at all levels, and they need a manifesto, for instance, like this one, need to be centered in negotiations, needs to be centered in global spaces as well, because it comes from them, like one of the key principles of feminist activism is really to ask and listen to the primarily concerned and affected people. And I think this is what we really need to do when it comes to girls and adolescents. And that brings me, to one of the other kind of key principle of feminist organizing, which is accountability. And when we're asking ourselves, Mabel has really presented that really well, that we are facing a crisis of multilateralism. This crisis doesn't come from nowhere. It has been exacerbated by the postures of the Trump administration, but really it was brewing from before. It was brewing because of double standards in the application of international law, with the genocide in Palestine has really exposed the fault lines. But it has been brewing by the double standards in how we address different crises, but also with, and this is something that the Prime Minister of Canada in his speech at Davos has really put forward, is that this multilateral system was steeped in colonialism. So the fact that it was fragile and volatile from day one, it's not a surprise that it's now porous to attacks, such as the attacks that the Trump administration is wielding against it. So what do? Because we also do not want a world without multilateralism. We know what a world without multilateralism would look like, and it's not a world that we want to live in. So now is the time to reimagine collectively what multilateralism can look like. How do we make it people-centered? How do we make accountability at the root of everything and every process and every global space? How do we ensure that the legal obligations of states, because it seems that, when you listen to some conversations, it seems that we have magically arrived to this particular moment, that it's not something that was orchestrated by states themselves. They still have obligations, and we are, as activists and women human rights defenders, we're the ones holding them accountable. And so what does it mean in a time of erosion of multilateralism to still use multilateral spaces as sites of accountability? You have mentioned the UPR, which has historically been one of the most accessible, most useful tools that human rights defenders have leveraged to hold their governments accountable. I think I would also like to use other mechanisms. The treaty bodies are another site that, human rights defenders can use to hold their governments accountable. The special procedures as well have really proven to be really very strong allies, and they have proven to be a very useful mechanism for human rights defenders to hold states accountable via their country visit, via the reports that they produce. So what we're trying to do as Women Deliver, as an organization working in close collaboration with partners, we're trying to create this space at the end of April where not only we meet, but we strategize together. we see the conference as one of the many different stops, or many different, other organizations are convening big conferences as well. We have UN convened global spaces. Women Deliver is one of these stops. And we see the conference as part of an ongoing conversation, an ongoing strategy space for us to think, what is the world that we want to live in? We haven't been defeated. Yes, fascism is at our door, but we haven't been defeated. How do we build a big united front with women human rights defenders, with adolescents, with young people, with states, with philanthropy? How do we build a progressive united front that enshrines accountability and continues to push forward a progressive agenda? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paola. And thanks for stressing upon the need for remaining united against this global patriarchy and fascism, what Mabel had also pointed out, and how to hold governments accountable. Paola, would you be staying till the end? Because I was told that perhaps you have some other engagement later on. So we will take up questions for you right now, if it is okay with you.
Sure, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So Edith Magak wants to know that will the building of this new transnational feminist movement be an umbrella of all the smaller ones or a totally new entity?
I think it's a really open-ended question. I think it's something that we would like to continue discussing. We've been engaged in a lot of consultations in the last few months, and these consultations will continue and will also happen at the conference. And I really think that the one of the guiding principles is solidarity, and not like performative solidarity, but really, standing so close to the people who are being targeted that you also get, the backlash yourself, that kind of meaningful solidarity and accountability. And so I feel that if we really truly want to make sure that everyone is having a say, to the extent that is possible, we don't have like that big of a reach either, but I feel that it's still something that we need to make a very concrete effort to make sure that everyone is able to meaningfully participate and bring their priorities. And then it's a matter of amplifying each other's priorities and listening and learning from each other. So I don't have like a definite response. I think that everyone is very welcome to come to this conversation and bring their own point of view.
Thank you. Zafar Kidwai, a journalist from Bangladesh, wants to know if Women Deliver Conference 2026 will be impacted by US decisions or other pushbacks like the Geneva Consensus Declaration, etc.
We exist in the same environment as everyone else. So I think that we are putting in place safeguards as much as possible so that there is no infiltration, I would say, of anti-rights and anti-gender actors at the conference. Now, as Women Deliver as an organization, as also a global advocacy organization, we are feeling the impact of the Geneva Consensus Declaration at every turn. At every negotiations that we attend, we see that the nefarious, and just a reminder, this is not a multilaterally negotiated document. The Geneva Consensus Declaration is something that the Alliance for Defending Freedom and other anti-rights organizations have put together, and then they went and demarched states to sign it, and now it has been obviously amplified by the Trump administration. It is not a document that bears any kind of legal, it has no legal bearing. However, else it's being put forward. So we are seeing, we are seeing its effect. We are hoping that the feminist playbook that Women Deliver and partners are working on is kind of act as a counter, like it provides a different narrative. The Geneva Consensus Declaration and very, reactionary documents cannot be the only narratives that are being presented in global spaces, but also in regional and national places. So yes, we are impacted as everyone else. The whole sector is impacted. And I think this is what makes uniting all the more important.
Barbara wants to know, how does Women Deliver engage with trans people and support trans people who are directly attacked by the Trump administration while still having policies affecting all women in their diversity?
So we work we built a very concrete example. So first of all, Women Deliver has a very clear position of support of trans rights and being of support and in solidarity with trans communities. That means that we work very closely with trans rights activists and trans rights organizations. That means that we we amplify their work and we amplify their message. We are building the program of the conference in collaboration with a very wide range of organizations, including LGBTIQ plus organizations and including trans rights organizations. So we are not a service provider. So for instance, we don't provide services, but as a global advocacy and a convener organization, we are really trying to center trans rights organizations and trans voices and make sure that the conference is safe, as much as we have control over it, is safe for everybody and inclusive of everybody.
Okay, thank you. I think Latoya asked a similar question, that how can those beyond the binary be included in this movement? And often whenever we talk about women, the non-binary people are left out. Yet we want to make sure that no one is left behind. So I think you have covered that, but perhaps if you want to say anything more.
No, I think that these are questions.
Yeah.
No, just to say very quickly, I think that these are questions that, we can never have enough, because it is true that in a myriad of ways, exclusion happens. And so I think that it is a constant exercise to make sure that, is there someone that we need to ask? Is there expertise that we need to bring in? Is there, are we omitting? So I feel that it's really important. And this is why we're trying to cast a very wide net in terms of how inclusive we are, and to check our own ways of working as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paola.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Our next speaker was to be Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, who's former Chief Scientist, WHO, and former Director General of Indian Council of Medical Research. But there have been some last-minute changes in her travel plans, so she has sent her apologies for not being able to be here today. I welcome Tushar Niroula, Gender Justice Advocate and former Executive Director of Mary Stopes International, Nepal. Welcome, Tushar. Over to you. Tushar, yes.
Hi, Shobha.
Yes, hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now we can see you also. Yes.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
great.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. It's such a privilege to speak on an issue that's sitting at the intersection of a global politics, gender equality, and fundamental human rights to health. I strongly believe that international organizations are the platforms through which norms are set, resources are mobilized, and accountability is pursued, especially for women, girls, and marginalized populations. When a developed nation like United States disengages from the large number of international organizations, including UN entities such as UN Women or UNFPA, it affects the prioritization and overall access to rights and services. So today I'll be briefly talking about its global implications, regional consequences, and what it means for countries like Nepal. So basically, United States has historically been one of the largest financial contributor to the UN system or agencies and global health initiatives. Withdrawal from organizations such as UN Women, UNFPA, and other multilateral bodies creates immediate funding gaps. And particularly for gender equality, this can mean reduced support for women's leadership and political participations, cut to program which addresses gender-based violence, and weakening of advocacy for sexual and reproductive health and rights. In context to the human rights to health, these gaps disproportionately will affect maternal and newborn health services, access to contraception and safe abortion care, and many other programs and specifically targeted for women and girls. When funding shrinks, gender responsive health programs are often the first to be deprioritized. And this we have seen in our country, and there are so many several examples of it. This creates the space for more conservatives or regressive actors to influence global agendas. The result is just not the slow progress, but in some cases, active rollback of hard won gains, particularly around bodily autonomy, LGBTQI rights, and adolescent health. International organizations provides an accountability mechanism. When we are talking about accountability, international organizations are equipped and they are expert in developing those accountability mechanisms. They allow civil society and smaller organizations to hold government accountable to global commitment, such as the SDGs and universal health coverage. US withdrawal weakens everything. Now, when we are looking from the perspective of the regional implication, I think as of the global implications, it cascades down to the region, and particularly when we see regions such as South Asia or Southeast Asia, which rely heavily on multilateral mechanism for gender and health programming, reduced U.S. Funding or withdrawal can mean that scaling back of regional gender equality initiatives, less coordinated responses to cross-border health challenges, and importantly, increased dependency on bilateral aid with narrower priorities. This shift often weakens right-based programming and replaces it with a short-term or politically conditional assistance. Now, when we see from the country perspective, and particularly the implication for Nepal, it's humongous. And the reason I say humongous is Nepal has made a notable progress in gender equality and health outcomes, such as reduction in maternal mortality and increased women's political representations. Much of this progress has been supported by UN agencies, including UN Women, UNFPA, UNICEF, and WHO. And US withdrawal affecting these agencies can result in reduced technical and financial support for gender responsive health policies, slower progress on sexual and reproductive health services, especially in remote areas, and challenges in sustaining the gains in maternal, adolescent, and reproductive health. When we look from the marginalized group perspective, women from marginalized communities like Dalit women, indigenous women, or women with disabilities, or migrant women are most at the risk when international support is withdrawn. Programs addressing intersectional discrimination and access to health services are often donor dependent. A weakened multilateral system therefore risks widening existing inequalities within our country. In conclusion, I think US withdrawal from international organization has the real consequences on gender and health-related issues for millions of lives. For a country like Nepal, the challenges is to protect and deepen progress on gender equality and right to health. Even in uncertain global environment, this requires a stronger national commitment, resilient multilateralism, and continued collective actions. Thank you so much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tushar. And what is the situation in Nepal, I think, is shared by so many other countries of South Asia as well, and the global South per se. We will take up the questions later on.
Yes. I've got some urgent thing that has come up. So
okay.
If I can take the question, or I can take the question by email as well. So whatever.
All right. Maybe we can send it to you by email if there are any questions coming later.
Sure,
Thank
sure.
you. Thank you, Tushar.
Thank you so much.
I now invite Pauline Fernandez, Coordinator, Philippine Safe Abortion Advocacy Network, PINSAN, which launched the Decriminalize Abortion Now network at the Davos World Economic Forum this year to elevate the issue of reproductive justice in the Philippines to a global stage. Welcome, Pauline.
Hi, hello. I'm Pauline
Hi.
Fernandez from the Philippines. Hi.
Yes.
From the Philippine Safe Abortion Advocacy Network, or PINSAN. Yeah. So just a brief background for those who may not be familiar with PINSAN. So we're a network based in the Philippines that in 2015 was founded by legal and medical experts, community-based leaders, faith-based advocacy groups, and other SRHR advocates. So a couple of years prior, in 2012, the Philippines had passed the landmark RPRH law, or the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Act. For the women's movement, its passage was not just a legislative victory, but really, a culmination of a grueling, more than a decade of years of struggle that united advocacy groups to reframe reproductive health as a human rights and social justice issue. However, despite these hard-won victories, SRHR remains under prioritized in the national agenda, and even within the broader movement, abortion rights are often treated as a fringe and contentious topic. And Pinsan was born out of that confrontation of the uncomfortable truth that the RPRH law itself, while a landmark, ultimately had to leave abortion rights issues at the negotiating table. And then as a network, we see the imperative to keep that conversation going and to center abortion rights issues on our right to bodily autonomy, our right to compassionate and non-judgmental healthcare, our right to a legal landscape that doesn't punish us for accessing care. But obviously, it hasn't been without its challenges. And just for context, the Philippines abortion laws are among the most restrictive in the world. The revised penal code considers abortion to be a criminal offense punishable for care providers who perform abortions and persons in need of abortion care who undergo it. And the law doesn't explicitly permit it under any circumstances. And despite it being criminalized, abortion remains a widespread and urgent reality in the Philippines. Data shows that in the country, upwards of 1 million women undergo abortions annually, especially affected the women and girls from vulnerable and underserved communities. And because of abortion-related complications, up to 3 women die every day in the Philippines. Each year, Filipino women resort to clandestine and unsafe methods to end their pregnancies, proving that restricting abortion does not stop it. Instead, it drives the practice underground, putting women's health and lives at risk. Moreover, while the law technically allows for post-abortion care, this criminalization creates a climate of fear. Women suffering from complications, they often delay seeking help because they don't want to be arrested. Healthcare providers, bound by their own perceptions on abortion, bound by their fear of prosecution, may threaten or delay treatment for these women, turning hospitals into sites of interrogation rather than that of healing. These laws, they validate social stigma, forcing women to carry the trauma of unsafe procedures in silence, and the silence prevents us from advocating for our rights, effectively kind of insulating the state from accountability for this public health disaster, basically, that they've created. And to hold the state and different actors accountable, we really have to unmask the forces that kind of hold us hostage from fully accessing our reproductive rights. the movement against abortion rights in the Philippines is often dismissed as purely religious and conservative, but in reality, it's a sophisticated political machinery that weaponizes culture and faith to sort of entrench this inequality. And given that abortion issues disproportionately affect women, it reinforces this need to control women's bodies and women's decision making, and upholds this systemic barrier to reproductive justice. So we see this in the halls of Congress and Senate, where, for example, recently the passage of the Prevention of Adolescent Pregnancy Bill was blocked because it presented language on sex and gender and reproductive health that isn't palatable to some, saying that it would, they say, hypersexualize children. Um, we see this in how government agencies who have expressed support for the decriminalization of abortion are threatened with their budgets being slashed. We see this in when more progressive lawmakers, for example, show support for women's reproductive health issues, receive tons of backlash or red tag or get heat from fellow lawmakers. We see so-called pro-life movements take up space online or hold mass mobilizations centered on disinformation and fear-mongering. Um, Perhaps the most dangerous phase of the movement is within the healthcare system itself. So we see hospital staff interrogate and shame patients. We see kind of abuses of consensus objection clauses where doctors refuse to provide even legal reproductive services like contraceptives or post-abortion care services. And as mentioned earlier, those are usually framed through the guise of religiosity or care for Filipino values. And this narrative is a calculated tool that forces women to carry the disproportionate burden of reproduction while stripping us from our fundamental right to choose. And framing abortion as a moral crime rather than a healthcare necessity. The state and its conservative allies use faith and values as a shield to ensuring that our bodies remain public property rather than our own. Uh, there's, as mentioned earlier, there's also growing international backlash that isn't happening in a vacuum. It creates a direct ripple effect in the Philippines. This also impacts us as international donors withdraw their funding and support from local programs on SRHR and other women and gender issues. The U.S. withdrawal from from different international organizations, for example, it's not just a diplomatic move; it's also a signal. It signals permission from a global superpower that it's okay for governments to deprioritize gender equality, and it may feel less. And governments may feel less pressured to comply with international treaty obligations. Um, we saw this in action during the Philippines' recent Universal Periodic Review at the UN Human Rights Council that, despite receiving direct, urgent recommendations to decriminalize abortion and pass the SOGI equality bill, the Philippine government did not accept these recommendations, dismissing them as contrary to our so-called national culture and religious values. And within PINSAN, the centerpiece of our campaign is the call to decriminalize abortion in the Philippines. This means that abortion will no longer be treated as a crime. This is different from legalization, which means that a law is passed that explicitly allows and defines abortion in certain times or periods, time periods or conditions. However, if criminal laws remain in place, um, people can still be punished if they fall outside of expressed legal grounds. And what we want from the decriminalization campaign is to remove these abortion provisions from the revised penal code, ensuring that no one goes to jail for having, assisting with, supporting, performing, or providing abortion care. Um, and all of this is in line with the belief that abortion care is an essential form of healthcare and that healthcare should not be a crime. And one of the major gains in our almost a decade of pushing for this campaign is that last year, 2025, we had officially, formally had the national launch of the Decriminalized Abortion Now network. So this was in September, and we had coincided it with the International Safe Abortion Day. This was a milestone in the sense that prior to this, we had partners and advocates supporting the campaign, making statements, attending events, sometimes discreetly. But now we actually have this solid network with a membership base that have kind of formally come together and agree to this basis of unity and express their commitment to move and strategize on the next steps towards the criminalization of abortion in the Philippines. And from the less than 10 organizations and individuals initially that were part of PINSAN that were the drivers of this campaign. We now have around 130 organizations, individuals expressing their commitment and upwards of around 30,000 signatories on this petition that we have that's supportive of decriminalization. More than gaining numbers, having people and groups, support this movement, um, helps build the momentum and confidence to push forward. And talking about abortion in the Philippines, it's very taboo, it's very controversial. You get judged, you risk being prosecuted, whether legally or socially, and with limited resources too. Because supporting abortion issues, isn't particularly popular to the general public. And despite that, when you have brave advocates openly supporting the call, it transforms the very nature of our struggle. It means that we have somehow shattered the isolation that conservatives have used to silence us. And we're moving forward from a position of vulnerability to one of collective power. And this network proves that despite the threats and the stigma, there is a critical mass of Filipinos, ready to stand on the side of history and to ensure that no one has to fight um, for their bodily autonomy alone. And this achievement is the culmination of strategic movement building, policy advocacy, and sustained public engagement. It was established through a deliberate process of base building and stakeholder convening. We had talked to different actors within civil society, especially those within the HR, SRHR advocacy, making sure we're able to tap different sectors and groups such as laborers and workers, urban poor, rural women, persons of diverse SOGI, persons living with HIV, sex workers, persons with disability. We've held learning sessions, so advocates are able to learn more about this taboo topic that seldom really gets talked about. Um, we also have talks. We also hold talks with artists, storytellers, filmmakers, media practitioners to try and shift the public opinion and address the stigma. Very successfully recently is the release of the film Sunshine, which is now on Netflix, at least the Netflix in the Philippines, which PINSAN was consulted on in its initial stages. And this film, um, this film that stars a very Filipino actress, is directed by a very famous Filipino director. It tells the story of how a young girl sought an abortion clandestinely, and it depicted it in such a dark yet real way, but still while emphasizing power and choice. And it really opened the door on how to talk about abortion with a wider audience, and led to um, talks with different lawmakers as well. And finally, the campaign is built on rigorous policy advocacy aimed at strengthening laws and standards for post-abortion care as well as for decriminalization. We also have drafted a proposed decriminalization of abortion bill, which has engaged champions within um, legislature and other government agencies, and we're setting up strategic meetings with elected officials to try to get this bill filed. And these legislative efforts, combined with the grassroots pressure from this newly formed decriminalization of abortion network, um, constitute just the core strategy of achieving legal change. Um, it was mentioned earlier that we're having also this regional launch in Mindanao in the latter part of January. So Mindanao, it's the southernmost island in the Philippines. It's far from the capital, from Metro Manila. And we see that by establishing a stronghold here, the campaign signals that the demand for talking about abortion rights, it's not just kind of a concept from the center, not just a concept from the metropolis, but it really is a grassroots necessity for others for survival, especially in the country's most vulnerable regions. And to truly nationalize the movement, you really have to actively engage the communities that are often sidelined in national policy debates. And as we enter the rest of the year, the rest of 2026, facing rising tide of global and local anti-rights pushback, a response really has to be rooted in accountability. We can no longer allow repressive actors to hide behind its restrictive laws and create a public health crisis that claims the lives of countless women every day. We move forward to reclaim our dignity and rewrite the narrative of reproductive health, not just in the Philippines, but across the globe, ensuring that the future is defined not by punishment, not by stigma, but by compassion, healthcare, and the fundamental freedom to decide for our own bodies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. And thank you for putting the focus once again on decriminalizing abortion. And all force to you for the great work you are doing. We all have to fight mini USAs in our own respective countries. And together we can do it. Thank you very much. We are honored to have with us Virginia Kamowa, Regional and Country Engagement Manager, Global Center for Health Diplomacy and Inclusion, where she provides leadership to support regional institutions and country partners in leveraging the Universal Periodic Review and related mechanisms to advance sexual and reproductive health and rights and amplify Global South voices. Welcome, Virginia. The stage is yours now.
Thank you very much, Shoba, and thank you, the previous speakers. Yes, the previous speakers and Shoba have all talked about accountability mechanisms. So today I'm going to focus my talk on a universal periodic review, which is a national accountability mechanism. And I know some of the participants already know about the Universal Periodic Review, but we thought it's important to just talk about the Universal Periodic Review broadly as an accountability mechanism, because as the previous speakers have mentioned, we need to have mechanisms for holding member states accountable for human rights obligations and commitments. And Universal Periodic Review is one such mechanism. And in terms of who gets reviewed by the Universal Periodic Review, it's all 193 UN member states. And this is done in cycles of every 4 to 5 years. So at the moment, so far, 3 cycles of Universal Periodic Review have been done. And we are now into the 4th reporting cycle. So our first cycle was between 2008 to 2011. And then the second one was from 2012 to 2016. The third was 2017 to 2022, and now on the fourth, 2022 to 2027. In terms of how it works, so there's national report that is written by governments within the country, but also there are UN bodies within the country that also do their own compilation. And stakeholders like civil society, NGOs, and human rights institutions also compile their summary report. And during the process, other states ask questions and make recommendations to the country that is being reviewed. And the reviewed country can accept or not those recommendations. And then the follow-up happens in the next cycle of the UPR review. Why does the UPR matter for national accountability? The UPR is the only mechanism of UN mechanism that reviews every country on a regular cycle against human rights obligations of the governments. And it, as others had said previously, it produces a public on-the-record government commitment. So all the commitments that are in the Universal Periodic Review are public. The public have access to those recommendations. So that makes it easier to hold the governments accountable for the commitments that are there. And the UPR creates a clear accountability pathway because you have the commitments made, and then there's expectation of action on those commitments. And after 4 years, progress is reviewed. And it also links international obligations that are made by countries that are signatory to human rights, different human rights policies. So it links obligations at the global level to national policy and budgets, and also to service delivery, because they're supposed to look at these things. So governments accept or reject specific recommendations that are made. And then there's also political clarity in terms of which recommendations that they work on. And these recommendations, as they are public, they can also be traced. And also because the UPR is time-bound, that means these obligations are also time-bound in terms of implementation. And repeated review cycles expose what progress has been made on the recommendations. It also reviews where there's a stagnation or regression. And as we all know, the accountability does not just stop in Geneva, where the recommendations are made, but implementation happens at the national level. And in terms of who is accountable, it is the government to start with, because they are the ones that are accountable for implementation of those recommendations that are made. And parliaments in governments have a responsibility, oversight, in terms of registration and budgets to implement those recommendations. And public institutions must deliver services on the recommendations that are made. And civil society and communities play a very critical role because they provide the monitoring, the scrutiny, and the follow-up that is required during the implementation period. And public oversight is essential in translating the UPR commitments into change, because if there's no public oversight, those commitments might just be stagnant without being followed up. So that public oversight is very, very important for accountability. In terms of, let me talk about an example of the right to health. In terms of promotion of recommendations related to the right of health, there's been an increase over time from the first cycle of the UPR to the current cycle. There've been that increase. More and more recommendations have been on health, which is a good thing. So yes, there's that increase that has been seen. And then, as I said initially, there are some recommendations that are accepted and some that are noted. And there's also been an increase in acceptance rates of recommendations. Overall, 76% of recommendations that are made have been accepted. And those that are health-related, it's about 82% that have been accepted. So over time, there's been that increase in acceptance. And just to mention that over the cycles, there's also been UPR recommendations of maternal health. There's been progress that has been made on UPR recommendations on maternal health. And those that have been accepted, especially the recommendations on maternal health that have been accepted, there's been progress that has been noted over the cycle, starting from cycle 1 to the current cycle. In terms of the right to health, let me just talk briefly about why maternal mortality and sexual and reproductive health matter in the right to health. Maternal mortality, as we all know, is something that is largely preventable and is a core indicator to right to health. High maternal mortality reflects systemic failures, limited sexual and reproductive health rights access, workforce shortages, unsafe abortions and discrimination. Women who are poor, rural, young, or marginalized are disproportionately affected. What does the UPR deliver on SRHR and maternal health? States can routinely receive recommendations to reduce maternal mortality, improve access to quality of maternal health care services, and expand SRHR information and services. They can also address gender inequality and some harmful practices. When accepted, these recommendations become like formal state commitments once the recommendations have been made and accepted by countries under review. What are some of the accountability questions that the UPR enables? Some of the questions that the UPR enables are questions like, what are some of the SRHR and maternal health commitments that the government has accepted? What laws and policies or strategies have been adopted or strengthened? Have maternal mortality rates declined? And for which populations? Those are some of the questions that the UPR enables. And then in terms of turning commitments into accountability, the UPR provides authoritative language to connect local realities to international promises. It strengthens advocacy narratives, such as governments committed to reduce maternal deaths. And then questions can be asked, where is the progress? Like under every reporting period, such questions can be asked. So the UPR also helps to transform advocacy from moral appeals to evidence-based accountability, which is very important. Also, I think implementation failures matter. It's important to also spotlight issues that governments have failed to implement, so that those recommendations can be focused on when it comes to implementing or improving progress on those issues. And failure to implement also represents a breach of accountability with direct consequences for the lives of women. And public scrutiny ensures that commitments to protect health and dignity are not ignored. So the key messages on the use of the UPR as an accountability mechanism for national reporting is that the UPR is a public accountability contract between the states and their populations. And realizing the right to health depends on national implementation and sustained public oversight, which is very, very important. And there is evidence that UPR recommendations can have long-term impact on improving health outcomes. So in terms of what I wanted to share, I'll stop here, but I'll quickly just to share that there are a few upcoming UPR reviews and reporting, and one of those, like for example, at the moment in January, there's a UPR review taking place, and some countries that are part of that are countries like Rwanda, has just gone 21 January, 22 January, countries like St. Lucia, and also some of the upcoming in May are countries like Namibia, Mozambique, countries like Somalia, Seychelles, and other countries like also Sierra Leone, Eswatini, and many other countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Virginia, for laying threadbare the UPR processes, and it gives us some hope in advancing health rights of women and girls and gender diverse peoples. Thank you very much. I can see Ravadee of Sustainable Development Foundation, Thailand in the audience, and also Semjidmaa Choijil, Psychological Responsiveness of Mongolia. Can you please share your insights and reflections on the issue being discussed today? We'll be very happy to have some intervention from you. Ravadee?
Hi, I'm Ravadee.
Hi. Yes, Ravadee, please.
For SDF, since we are very much focused on the fisheries sector and working to make the women fisher visible, so that the issue that we have been trying to really make, because right now, according to the government, we are not considered as fishers. Only those who have boat are considered as, fisher people. Therefore, 50% of the women fisher have been really not been recognized. But then we have been very much affected by the change of climate, by so many economic-driven development, by many top-down, without recognition of customary right and women participation, meaningful participation. So it had been very hard. So right now, to the issue of women right that we are addressing, it is not only to make the government recognize, but we also need to work with the colleague, the partner in the family themselves to recognize their wife, to recognize in the fishery sector, to recognize that another half of the fisher people have been left behind, but it really cost them more work burden, and so because of economic issues, they also have a kind of violence, the fighting, and then they're really busy work. They have really less time or no time at all to access to new what is going on surrounding them, but then they have been affected in terms of economic, in terms of physical, and also related ecosystem, marine and coastal resource, biodiversity degradation. So this is the issue that we are working on. So right now, what we are trying to do, we have not directly deal with the women right as a violent aspect as such, but more of advocate for their rights and then let them be in the formal data system of the government, because if you are not in a formal data system, you cannot guarantee as a target group. It means that you are not being allocated the resources and the program based on your need and concern. And also within the mechanism of decision making and whatever issues at community level, provincial level, at national level, that directly and indirectly affected them have not been really considered the point of view, opinion of women. So this is what we are working on, to make them formally recognized. Among our movement, we have to make them understand very important aspect of women that have been somehow just overlooked and then just take advantage of them. So I think this is the issue we are dealing with, but then we are now having a very strong women movement to not only advocate for the change of the law, the structure, the planning, the policy, but we are now very active of demonstrating that with the leaders of women, working together with the women in the community and also working with the men. With youth, we have been produced a very good evidence of restoring biodiversity, and then it also directly provide a positive economic earn and also provide opportunity for them to have alternative for their life and then participate in decision making. So I think these are the issues that we have been working. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Semjidmaa, would you please like to share something?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, very clearly. Very clear.
Good evening, everyone. Here is a very late. So I'm sorry I didn't catch everything because I had another discussion with others.
Okay.
And I just would like to briefly state my concern about the sexual and reproductive health and rights. If you look at the UPR reporting from Mongolian side, I have, I have my fact sheet on the UPR side, but there are, regarding to this SRH issue, everything seems in my country is back, When I was started to work with IPPF in 1996, we have established 3 SRH clinic, 10 youth center, etc. But now you know that 3 clinics, just one is working, the other is closed already. So the government really prohibiting even contraceptives, that even condom cannot distribute through the NGO clinic. So they do, our Mongolian Family Welfare Association, they manage through the government hospitals and women's clinic, etc. Which I think that everything regarding the sexual and reproductive health and rights are back. And just they do some government allocation on the contraceptives, which there is no monitoring system, that the woman who is living in remote rural areas, we don't know, there is no statistics, no, monitoring report, etc. So I think that even there is prohibited to talk about safe abortion issues, which is, very restricted and very difficult to talk about that. So what else? Then my, if you look at my fact sheet on the UPR, there is my research study on the mental health issues, health and mental health issues. A lot of issues related to the mental health issues and the human rights issues very in concern. So I think that everybody can visit the UPR reporting and the independent submission by the NGOs. Then you can see, and we can further discuss about other things. Okay. My concern, that self-abortion issue is very important, because when I implemented the global abortion care project. So there are a lot of, reform in the health sector was, how to improve it. But now everything is back, and the from two of the three of my established clinics are closed, etc. Even is not widely talking about safe abortion issues, which is the main issue for reducing the poverty for the SDGs goal.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your reflections. Thank you. We have a question for Pauline from Edith Magak, and Edith wants to know that did the USAID cuts affect family planning services in the Philippines? And can you briefly comment on accessibility of family planning in your country? Question for Pauline. Is Pauline there? Pauline, are you there?
No, she's not there.
No, she's not there. Okay. Has Yvonne is raising her hand. Yes, Yvonne? Yes, Yvonne.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah.
much. My name is Yvonne Ogola. I'm the Executive Director at Dreams Redefined community-based organization that is located in Kenya in a city called Kisumu. So I just wanted to also give my sentiments on the topic about anti-rights pushback against gender equality, and that it's time for advocacy and also for demanding accountability. So I wanted to bring in the aspect of promotion of meaningful young women and youth participation. It is just not about, when we talk about working towards achieving gender equality, then it's high time we talk about including young people in the room. That itself is to shift power positively towards realizing gender equality. When it's not done well, then it becomes the strongest pushback. But when we promote meaningful youth participation, then it becomes the strongest antidote to anti-rights pushback, because it builds legitimacy, resilience, and also accountability from the ground. So you realize that issues around access to sexual reproductive health and rights, issues around climate resilience and adaptation, issues around women's or young people's participation in political and decision-making process is pushed back when they are not meaningfully involved, when they are not just represented but heard, when their voices are not just included but really acted upon. So some of the ways we can ensure that we achieve gender equality is by giving young people space to also participate in decision-making processes. Then you realize that issues like issues around abortion, issues around access to other reproductive healthcare services would really be strengthened, because they will be in the room to say, this is what we want, this is what we have, and this is what we want to see better, as opposed to young women and young people being spoken. You speak on behalf of these young people. You are in the decision-making table representing the youth who could have represented themselves actually. So as we talk about getting the antidotes toward the pushback, let's create youth-led spaces, let's involve them, and also just to talk about someone has just asked if the USAID cut affected access to reproductive health care services. Of course, that is something that is happening even in Kenya right now. The access has declined, because you realize that most of the services like access to contraception, family planning, even just condoms. At some point, we had scarcity of condoms in Kenya for issues around safe abortion and also post-abortion care. They have been greatly affected. And even during that time that USAID was there was provision for what is available, not by choice. So I think let us create meaningful platforms for young people to participate, especially on matters that concerns them directly, as opposed to young women and young people being represented. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yvonne. Latoya, I can see your hand up. Latoya? Yes, Latoya, we are waiting for you to say something.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
Oh, brilliant. My name is Latoya Johnston. I am the founder and executive director of Transuri Organization, which is a community-based organization located in a place known as Homa Bay in Kenya, Western Kenya to be specific. Our organization is focusing on human rights, but specifically on transgender, intersex, and gender non-conforming needs. So now my question is, whenever we are always meeting at the She Rights or at other spaces, all the conversations that are often happening are either at national level or at regional level or at international level. But young organizations like Transuri or HBL, which is like really working with the minorities within the rural areas, are not often considered or like their work being brought forth. I love what Yvonne Ogola has said, and it was really making sense. However, we also have to recognize the fact that we are still having hard issues when it comes to recognizing people who identify beyond the binary. And people like transgender people that in Kenya suffer what we call legal gender recognition. This means that even our data, when it is collected, instead of the government using it, it is something that is just on the limbo. And whenever you ask more questions, things like referendum needs to be run in order to extinguish us. So now, how can we partner with the people like She Rights in order for you to be able to come down here, empower us? Because not all of us have got like internet and laptops and things. These are rural people that majority of them did not even go to school. So how then can we be able to work hand in hand all the way down here where we do program exchanges? You are able to come down here and we are able to come up there, so that during times of civic educations, during the times of movement building, during the times of participating in the UPR, during the moments of talking about Lake Victoria Economic Bloc, at least we are not left behind. Because these governments are very smart. They contribute, they initiate something, and by the time you are starting to advocate against it and make sure that inclusion is there, something is being done. And Trump administration is actually one of the key things that can inform you how marginalized African countries, more so the rural gender non-conforming people, like the transgender, intersex, and gender non-conforming, the cut of funding, and even like really if they were existing, not so many people support the rural-based organizations, more so community-based organizations. So how then can we be able to have what we call an action where we are able to be involved and also make sure that marginalized people, women are fighting about women, but then within the women movement, there is also the discrimination of like, oh, you are not born, it is bodily autonomy, oh, you are not this and that. So how can we move together in order for us to push back and make sure that no one is left behind? And how can She Rights work together with this organization, and you come to the ground and see what we are doing, and then also see how you are able to help us so that we move with one voice together. Thank you.
Would any of the speakers like to respond? Any of the presenters, please? Virginia, if you're there.
Yes, I am here.
Yes, Virginia.
Yes, I am here. And
Yeah.
I think Latoya has raised a number of key things in his question. Part of it was a question, part of it was just raising some concerns. And I think one that I picked on is the concern about how can people at the local level participate in some of these processes that happen at the national, regional, or global levels. And I don't have a simple and straightforward answer to this, but as far as the UPR process is concerned, just to mention that in terms of the UPR, I also saw a question in the chat, so I'll just respond together.
Yes,
in terms of the UPR, recommendations are made by other member states to a member state that is under review. So yes, other countries can make recommendations to another member state under review. And in terms of how different levels can participate in these processes, I think that comes also to national consultations and mobilization, because as I said, there are 3 levels of reporting. There's the national report, there's the UN report, but also there's a civil society summary or report. And it is under the civil society where civil society can mobilize at different levels, including at the local level. So I think at the national level, those responsible for doing the civil society and other human rights institution report are also responsible to make sure that the mobilization is not just for the people that are based in the capital cities or in the places where the reporting is being done, but to make sure that different constituencies based at different levels are involved in the reporting and review processes. Thank you. I hope this answers your question. Yes.
Thank you, Virginia. And we have already overshot our time by 18 minutes or so. So with this, we come to the close of today's session. My gratitude to the speakers for their thoughtful presentations and to the audience for their attention and reflections. Special thanks to Dr. Tangela Reddy for live streaming the whole session on his media channels. We have to rethink, rebuild, and rise as we continue on our arduous journey for gender equality. Today also happens to be Vasant Panchami, a festival which is celebrated in India to welcome the advent of spring. So happy Vasant Panchami to all of us. May the bone-cracking winter of gender inequality which infests the world be replaced with the spring of gender justice. Goodbye till we meet again next month. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes. Semjidmaa, hope to see you at the People's Forum in APFSD next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.